Hey Queens, this is Ali. I hope you enjoyed this story.
Uncle, sleeping on the floor, please come.
She was 3 years old. She weighed 22 pounds. And she saved a man's life while an entire crowd of adults stood there and did absolutely nothing. What happened next, I promise you, nobody saw coming. Not the billionaire. Not the mother who had spent 3 years trying to forget his name. And not the little girl holding a teddy bear that wasn't hers. By the time this story is over, you are going to question everything you think you know about fate, betrayal, and what love actually costs when it has been surgically removed from your life by someone who smiled at you over cheap wine and called herself your friend. Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. We tell stories here that will stay with you for days. And trust me, you cannot afford to miss what's coming in this one. Drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? Gyeongju in late October smells like persimmons and old stone. The market moves the way rivers move. Not fast, not slow, just constantly forward, pulling everything along without asking permission. Vendors call prices over each other's heads. Tourists photograph lanterns they will look at once on their phones and never again. Children drag their mothers toward fried dough stalls with the focused tactical energy of very small generals. Mary Johnson moved through all of it with a canvas bag over one shoulder and her 3-year-old daughter on her hip. She was 31. She moved, some mornings, like someone carrying more years than that. Her hair was tied back in the practical way of women who stopped caring what they looked like before 8 in the morning years ago, and her coat had an ink stain on the left cuff she kept meaning to address. She never did. Lily was an event. Round-cheeked, black-haired, with eyes that took up too much of her face in the way that made strangers stop mid-sentence. She observed everything: market stalls, pigeons, the geometry of roof tiles against sky, with the solemn attention of a tiny scientist cataloging a world she found endlessly worth studying. Mary set her down near the vegetable stalls while she compared cabbage prices between two vendors who both swore theirs was superior. Lily stood beside her, fingers curled into the hem of Mary's coat, watching a street performer 3 stalls down blowing soap bubbles the size of melons. The bubbles drifted upward and caught the afternoon light. Lily let go of the coat. Now pay attention. Because what looks like a small, ordinary moment is actually the hinge on which this entire story turns. A teddy bear rolled to Lily's feet. Brown, soft, the kind with a stitched smile that manages to look cheerful and vaguely philosophical at once. Still had the gift shop tag on its ear. It had come from somewhere to Lily's left, rolling with the slow certainty of something dispatched. Lily looked down at it, then looked up to find where it had come from. 20 feet away, a man had collapsed. He was tall, the kind of tall that makes you notice someone even in a crowd, the kind of presence that parts foot traffic without trying. Charcoal suit. Expensive. His briefcase had skidded open when he fell, papers fanning across the pavement like a scattered hand of cards. The gift shop bag lay beside him, torn at the handle. A crowd gathered with the speed crowds always gather. Excellent at assembling, less excellent at doing anything afterward. A woman covered her mouth. 2 teenagers filmed vertically, which made the whole thing feel worse somehow. A vendor in an apron craned his neck. A tourist couple backed away with the specific, slightly guilty movement of people who have already decided this is not their problem and are now physically relocating themselves from the radius of obligation. The man on the ground did not move. Lily watched him for 3 full seconds. She looked at the bear. She looked at him. She walked forward. She crouched beside him, the unself-conscious crouch of a toddler, knees wide, completely unbothered by the audience, and put her small hand on his shoulder and shook it. Nothing. She shook it again with more conviction. Still nothing. She reached into the little canvas backpack Mary insisted she wear and pulled out a phone. Mary's old spare, stripped of everything except 3 educational apps and 1 very important function. Because every evening for 6 months, Mary had sat with Lily on the kitchen floor and practiced. Not nursery rhymes. A phone number. What do you dial if mommy falls down and won't wake up? 911. What if someone else is very sick and nobody is helping? 911. It had become a song to Lily. A game. She'd recite it with the rhythm she used for her ABCs, not understanding what the numbers meant, just knowing they mattered. knowing that Mommy's voice went very serious, and serious voices meant words were important. Tiny fingers pressed the screen. The dispatcher answered immediately. Lily held the phone to her ear with both hands, very carefully, the way she'd watched Mary do it. "Uncle's sleeping on the floor," she said. "Please come." She couldn't give an address. She was 3. But the dispatcher, Park Ji-young, who would give interviews about this call for years afterward, kept her on the line and traced the location. Paramedics arrived in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Lily sat beside the man the entire time, holding his teddy bear. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She waited the way she'd watched Mary wait for things, quietly, with both feet flat on the ground. The man's name was Jang Min-ha, 35 years old, CEO of one of the largest construction conglomerates in South Korea. The paramedics said afterward that 6 more minutes and he would not have survived. 6 minutes. The length of one song. One commercial break. The time it takes to make a cup of coffee and forget why you made it. He would have died on a market street while 23 people stood in a circle and watched. But a 3-year-old girl picked up a teddy bear that wasn't hers and remembered a number, and she made a phone call. Someone in that crowd had a camera running. Not on the collapse, on Lily. A woman with a cooking blog had been filming the bubble performer when the bear rolled past her feet and Lily walked into frame. She posted the footage that evening with a caption she almost deleted for being too sentimental. She didn't delete it. 4 million views by midnight. By morning, news anchors across 3 countries were playing it on loop. The image of Lily, 22 pounds of absolute composure, waiting for an ambulance she had summoned herself, hit something in people that the internet rarely hits anymore. Not outrage. Not argument. Just something quiet and undone. Wonder Kid. The internet named her within hours. A bakery in Busan made a cake shaped like her face, which was alarming and also deeply sincere. Mary found out the way she found out most things. Her neighbor knocked at 7:15 while Mary stood at the stove making rice porridge and said simply, "Your daughter is on television." Mary turned off the stove. She sat on the kitchen floor with her neighbor's phone and watched herself on the news clip, recognizable from the back, spinning around when she realized Lily wasn't holding her coat anymore. She watched Lily hold that bear with both hands. She watched her daughter's face, solemn and certain, doing the thing Mary had taught her. She pressed her fingers over her mouth. Her neighbor looked out the window and pretended not to notice. Lily, informed of her fame, was interested primarily in the fact that the bear now lived in her room and that Mary had made her favorite soup 2 nights running. She didn't understand what she'd done. She just remembered the numbers. But here is what neither of them knew yet. And here is the thing that nobody knew yet. Somewhere in Seoul, in a house quiet enough to hear the hum of expensive appliances, a little girl sat on a cream-colored sofa and watched the same news clip playing on a television large enough to fill a wall. She was 3 years old. Her name was Ha-eun. And she had round cheeks, black hair, and eyes that took up too much of her face. She watched Lily on the screen for a long time without saying anything. Then she slid off the sofa, walked 2 steps closer to the television, and tilted her head. Her mother walked into the room behind her. Ha-eun didn't look away from the screen. "Mommy," she said. "Oh, why do I look exactly like Wonder Kid?" The glass her mother was holding hit the floor. Her name was Beatrice. And the glass didn't just fall. It exploded across the imported marble floor in the particular way of expensive things, dramatically, completely, with no possibility of being put back together. Ha-eun turned around at the sound, eyes wide. "Mommy, you dropped it." "I know, baby." Beatrice's voice came out steady. Practiced. The voice of a woman who had spent years making her face do one thing while her chest did another. "Go to your room while Mommy cleans this up." Ha-eun looked at the television once more, then padded away down the hallway in her socked feet, leaving small prints on the floor that Beatrice would later stand over and stare at for a very long time. The moment the door clicked shut, Beatrice sat down on the floor among the broken glass and did not move. She was 42 minutes like that. Nobody came to check on her because she had given the housekeeper the evening off, the way she always did when she needed the house to have no witnesses. On the screen above her, the news anchor was describing Lily's calm composure in warm, admiring tones. The video played again. Then again. Lily's face, enormous on the wall-sized screen, looking back at Beatrice with those eyes. Her hands started trembling. She pressed them flat against the cold floor. 3 years. She had built 3 years of mornings and bedtimes and skinned knees and first words and favorite songs into something that felt, most days, exactly like a real life. Ha-eun called her mommy without hesitation. Ha-eun reached for her hand in crowds. Ha-eun buried her face in Beatrice's neck when she was tired or scared, and Beatrice would hold her and breathe, and for a few minutes she could almost believe that the thing she'd done had somehow become something else with enough time and enough love. But love doesn't actually change what a thing is. It just makes you better at not looking at it. In a hospital recovery room in Gyeongju, in the same city as Mary but 4 kilometers away, a man was lying in a bed watching the same footage on a wall-mounted television. He had been unconscious when the paramedics arrived. He had been unconscious when they worked on him. He had been unconscious for 14 hours after that. But now he was awake and sitting up, and on the television screen was a little girl with round cheeks and black hair and eyes that took up too much of her face. And Jang Min-ha went completely still. Not because of the bear. Not because of the phone call. Because of the child's face. Because he had seen that face before. He had seen it every morning for 3 years across a breakfast table in Seoul, on a little girl named Ha-eun who tucked both sides of her hair behind her ears when she was thinking, who laughed first silently and then loudly, who called him daddy in the voice that had rearranged everything he thought he knew about himself. He sat up straighter. The heart monitor registered the change. His nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Jang, your heart rate." "Give me my phone," he said. But wait, because here's where it gets complicated. Because Min-ha wasn't just looking at a child who resembled his daughter. He was looking at a child's mother. Standing in the background of the footage, blurred but unmistakable. A woman with an ink stain on her left cuff and her hair tied back. A woman he had spent 3 years trying to forget with the determined unsuccess of someone trying to unlearn their first language. Mary Johnson was alive. Mary Johnson was in Gyeongju. And apparently she had a daughter. What do you think is going through his mind right now? Drop it in the comments. Because I need to know I'm not alone in how I'm feeling watching this unfold. He didn't sleep that night. Which the nurses attributed to the trauma of a heart attack and the disorientation of a new environment, and which was in fact neither of those things. Min-ha lay in the dark of the private room with the city lights of Gyeongju pressing orange against the curtain edges, and he did what he always did when something didn't add up. He went back through everything carefully in order, until he found where the mathematics had broken. Mary had left. That was what he'd been told 7 years ago, by the one person he'd had no reason to doubt. Beatrice, his then-girlfriend, his family's chosen match, his mother's preferred solution to the question of his future, had come to him with the particular gentleness of someone delivering news they claim not to enjoy delivering. Mary was gone. She had left Korea. There was someone else. She had not left a forwarding address or a word of explanation because, Beatrice had said softly, that was simply the kind of person Mary turned out to be. It was painful, she knew. She was sorry. She had put her hand on his arm. He had believed her. Why wouldn't he? Beatrice was precise, deliberate. She did not traffic in drama or exaggeration. And the evidence had seemed to support it. Mary's phone disconnected, her apartment emptied, her university acquaintances vague in the way people are when they've been asked to be vague. He had spent 6 weeks in a state he refused to call grief because it felt too large to name, and then he had done what men in his position do. He had worked. He had converted feeling into output. He had married Beatrice 18 months later in a ceremony arranged by people who spoke the language of alliances, and he had tried to mean it. Most days he came close. And now Mary Johnson was 4 kilometers away with a daughter and an ink stain on her cuff, and he was lying in a hospital bed with 4 bypassed arteries and the specific vertigo of a man whose past has just walked back into the present without asking permission. He thought about the little girl on the television. Ha-eun's face. The thought arrived and sat down and refused to leave. Mary didn't know he was in the hospital. The news had covered Jang Min-ha's collapse extensively, but she had been avoiding the coverage with the focused aversion she applied to things that threatened to cost her more than she could afford. She was a freelance translator. She had a daughter and a grocery list and a pharmaceutical document due by Friday, and she did not have the bandwidth for the emotional overhead of following a billionaire's health updates. She found out the way she found out most things that disrupted her careful Gyeongju life. Her neighbor. "The man your Lily saved," the neighbor said over the fence on Wednesday morning, while Mary was hanging laundry with Lily sitting on a blanket nearby, conducting some kind of legal proceeding involving her stuffed animals. He's at Jiangju Hospital. Private floor. Mary's hand stilled on a shirt collar. He's been asking about her, the neighbor continued, with the particular relish of someone who has been saving information for maximum conversational impact. His office sent someone to the hospital administrator, wanting to meet the family. Mary clipped the shirt to the line. That's kind of them, she said. They say he's devastated by what happened. The crowd that didn't help. He wants to thank her properly. Lily doesn't need thanks. He might, the neighbor said simply. Mary looked at Lily, who had apparently just delivered a very unfavorable verdict to a knitted rabbit. I'll think about it, she said. She did not think about it. She thought about something else entirely, the specific question of whether Jiang Minha was someone she'd heard of before this, whether the name connected to anything. She'd seen it on the news coverage she'd been avoiding. Construction magnate. Seoul-based. 35 years old. She told herself the low pull in her stomach was coincidence. She told herself a lot of things. The formal letter arrived the next morning. Thick cream paper with an embossed header. The representative of Jiang Minha wished to extend a personal invitation for Lily and her family to visit at their earliest convenience. Transportation provided. No obligation. Mary read it twice. Then she put it on the kitchen counter and looked at it for the rest of the morning while she worked. By afternoon she had written a polite confirmation. She told herself it was practical. The trip would have taken 3 weeks of careful budgeting. Lily needed new shoes. A thank you visit was a reasonable, ordinary thing that meant nothing and required nothing. She did not examine why her hand was unsteady when she sealed the envelope. The hospital floor where he was recovering was the kind of place that understands wealth as a form of quiet. Wide corridors, low voices, windows designed to make the outside world feel curated rather than chaotic. Mary walked down that corridor with Lily on her hip and the particular focus of a woman who has decided to be perfectly ordinary about something that is not ordinary at all. The door was open. She knocked on the frame. Minha was sitting up in bed. And for approximately 2 seconds, neither of them moved. 7 years is long enough to change the architecture of a face. It leaves different lines, different weight in the eyes. But there is something underneath the architecture of a face that doesn't change. Some arrangement of attention, of the particular way a person occupies space, and that thing is immediate and total and does not require time to be recognized. He knew her before she finished raising her hand to knock. She knew him before her eyes fully adjusted to the room's light. 2 seconds. Then Lily said with complete authority, "Uncle, you dropped your bear." And the room exhaled. Minha looked at the child. He did it the way you look at something that you are trying to see and understand simultaneously, which is very difficult because one process requires distance and the other requires closeness. His face was controlled, years of boardrooms had given him that, but his eyes moved between Lily and Mary with a speed and intensity that he couldn't fully govern. Lily looked back at him with Lily's customary composure. "That's mine," he said, nodding at the bear she held. "You dropped it," Lily said. "I did. On the floor." "On the floor," he agreed. "I kept it safe." Something moved across his face that wasn't quite a smile but was in the same territory. "You kept important safe." Lily appeared to find this an acceptable answer. She held the bear out to him. He took it with his unencumbered hand. The 4 ran along the back of the other, and immediately held it back to her. "I think he prefers you." Lily's face broke into a smile of such unguarded delight that even the heart monitor seemed to pause. And Minha, who had been watching the child with that careful trying to see quality, looked up at Mary. She was already looking at him. Neither of them said the other's name. "Thank you," he said, quietly, to her, for teaching her. She remembered on her own. Children remember what their parents make worth remembering. The sentence landed somewhere between them. He'd said it carefully, she thought. Very carefully. "How are you feeling?" she asked, because it was the appropriate question and because she needed to say something that had a straightforward answer. "Better than I deserve to," he said. "You didn't deserve a heart attack." "I meant," he said, "better than someone who was carried off a street by paramedics while a 3-year-old did the work deserves to feel." A beat. Then she almost smiled. He watched her almost smile the way he used to watch her, with his full attention, like he was memorizing something he wasn't sure he'd get to keep. She looked away first. She looked at Lily, who had walked to the foot of the bed and was studying Min-ha with the frank, investigative stare that she applied to things she was working out. "You have a little girl?" Lily said. He went very still. Not dramatically, just still. In the way of someone for whom a question has landed in a complicated place. "I do," he said. "What's her name?" "Haun." "Is she nice?" "She is," he said. "Though she would tell you she's very busy and important, which would also be accurate." Lily nodded, apparently respecting this. "Does she look like you?" The stillness again. Deeper this time. "People say so," he said. Mary had been watching his face. She saw the stillness, filed it, said nothing. They stayed 40 minutes. The conversation moved through safer places. His recovery, her work, Gyeongju, the market where it happened. He asked questions and listened to the answers the way he always had, not performing attention but actually paying it, tracking her face with a focus that was both familiar and destabilizing. She answered and asked questions back and laughed once, a real one, unauthorized, when he described his assistant's reaction to finding him in a hospital bed in a shirt he'd refused to remove. He looked at her when she laughed. Then he looked at Lily. Then back at Mary. And the question that was living behind his eyes, the question he had been circling since he first saw the footage, gathered itself. He didn't ask it. Not yet. But in the elevator going down, Mary held Lily's hand and stared at the closing doors and felt the shape of something she couldn't name pressing against the inside of her chest. "Did you like him?" she asked Lily. Lily thought with the seriousness she reserved for important questions. "He has kind eyes," she said. "But they're also sad." Mary looked straight ahead. "Yes," she said. "They are." That evening, Min-ha asked his assistant to pull up everything publicly available on Mary Johnson. Date of marriage to Lee Chan, date of birth of their daughter. Then he pulled up Ha-eun's birth records from his own files. He put the two dates side by side. He sat with that for a very long time. Then he picked up his phone and called the one person who could answer the question he hadn't asked in that hospital room. The call rang 6 times. Beatrice answered on the 7th. "Min-ha." Her voice was careful. Was always careful. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone who has just had a very interesting day," he said. Pause. "I'm glad you're recovering," she said. "Beatrice." He kept his voice level, the way he kept it level in negotiations when the other party didn't know yet that he already knew the answer. "Tell me about Lily." The pause this time was different. Longer. And in that pause lived everything. Beatrice said, "Who?" 2 letters. 1 word. Deployed with impressive calm. But Min-ha had spent 15 years in rooms where people said one thing while meaning its opposite, and he had developed an ear for the weight of a word when someone was holding it too carefully. "The little girl," he said. "Wonder Kid. Her mother is Mary Johnson. Lee Chan's wife." Another pause. "I know who she is," Beatrice said. "The whole country knows who she is." "And the child?" "What about the child?" He didn't answer. He let the silence do the work silence does when you leave it long enough. It presses. "Min-ha." Her voice had shifted. Still controlled, but a different kind of controlled, the kind that is being maintained by effort rather than ease. "You've just had a heart attack. You need to rest. We can talk when you're—" "She looks like Ha-eun." Silence. "Children resemble each other," Beatrice dismissed. "Not like this. You saw her on television for 30 seconds. You were recovering from—" "I saw her in person today." The silence that followed was the longest yet, and in it Min-ha heard something he had never once heard from Beatrice in 7 years of marriage. He heard her breathing. Not the controlled, measured breathing of a composed woman. The slightly uneven breathing of someone trying to keep a ceiling from coming down. "You met her," Beatrice said finally. "Her mother brought her to thank me. They were in the market when it happened." He watched the city lights beyond his window. "She's 3 years old, Beatrice. She has Ha-eun's eyes. Ha-eun's cheeks. The way she tilts her head when she's listening, identical. Not similar. Identical. Min-ha, when is Ha-eun's birthday?" "You know when." "Say it." "March 14th, Beatrice said quietly. "Anne Lily Johnson." He looked at the dates on his screen. March 14th. The city hummed below. A siren somewhere. The heart monitor beside him kept its patient count. I want you to come to Gyeongju, he said. Minha. Tomorrow. He ended the call. He put the phone down. He looked at the ceiling for a long time. The thing about being a man who has built his adult life on a story he was handed rather than one he chose is that dismantling it requires not just evidence but willingness. You have to be willing to look at what the evidence means. You have to be willing to follow it past the point where following it becomes uncomfortable. Minha was willing. He had always been willing to follow a thing to its end. It was, depending on the situation, either his greatest asset or his most expensive quality. He did not tell Mary any of this. Not yet. Mary had her own version of the night unfolding. She sat at the kitchen table after Lily was asleep with a cup of tea she forgot to drink and the specific, low-grade disturbance of someone whose careful life has just been rearranged by an afternoon. She was a practical woman. She had made herself practical out of necessity, the way you make yourself into what the situation requires when the alternative is being dismantled by it. After Lee Chan's accident, the car, the rain, the phone call from a hospital number she didn't recognize, she had taken exactly 3 weeks to grieve in the complete, private way she needed to, and then she had made herself practical and she had stayed that way. But practical women still notice things. And what she noticed, sitting at that table, was that she had spent 40 minutes in a room with a man she had told herself she'd finished thinking about years ago, and she had not been bored for 1 second of it. That was the detail she kept returning to. Not his face, though his face had done something to her composure that she had managed barely to contain. Not the familiar quality of his attention. Not the way he'd said her name when he thanked her. Just that she had not been bored. She'd forgotten what that felt like. The specific aliveness of a conversation that goes somewhere you didn't plan. She picked up her tea. Cold now. Drank it anyway. She thought about Lee Chan. She had loved him. She was still certain of that, certain enough not to complicate it with revision. He had been steady and warm and he had showed up in the year when she needed someone to show up, and she had built something real with him. Something that mattered. But there had always been, underneath the real thing, the faintest echo of a shape that came before it. She had never followed that thought to its end. She went to bed. Beatrice arrived in Gyeongju the following afternoon. She swept into the hospital room in the particular way she entered all spaces, precisely, with purpose, bringing her composure in ahead of her like a vanguard. She wore a coat the color of charcoal. She kissed Minha's cheek. She set her bag on the chair with practiced grace. She looked, he thought, like someone who had been preparing for this room since the moment he'd hung up. He watched her settle. Watched her arrange herself. Watched the careful architecture of her calm. Then he turned his phone toward her. On the screen was the footage. Lily in the market holding the bear. Beatrice looked at it. And there, for just a fraction of a second in the space between one breath and the next, her composure fractured. A hairline crack. There and gone. But he saw it. He had been watching for it. She looks like Haun, he said. There's a resemblance, Beatrice said. Her voice was even. Beatrice. Children sometimes. Look at her face. His voice was not raised. It was very quiet, which in his experience communicated more than volume. Not a resemblance. Not similar eyes or a coincidence of cheekbones. Look at that child's face and tell me what you see. Beatrice looked at the phone. Her manicured thumb moved, almost involuntarily, to the edge of the screen. I see a little girl, she said. You see Haun, he said. That's what you see. And I think you've known it since the moment this footage aired. She looked up at him. What are you saying? I'm not saying anything yet, he said. I'm asking. About Haun's birth. About what happened at the hospital. About the things you told me in those weeks before the birth. The complications the other families lost. Stop. Why? Because you're recovering from a cardiac event and you're grasping at... I want a DNA test. The room went very quiet. Beatrice set the phone down on the bed beside him. Carefully. The way you set down something you'd like to throw. You're serious, she said. Completely. She stood. She walked to the window. Outside, Gyeongju carried on with its ancient, indifferent business. Minha. Her voice had changed. The performance was still there, but it was thinner now, like ice in late February. Whatever you think you've worked out. I haven't worked anything out, he said. That's why I want the test. To rule it out. If Ha-Un is yours and you have nothing to hide, a test rules it out in 72 hours and I spend the rest of my recovery feeling foolish. Simple. She didn't answer. And her not answering was itself an answer. He looked at his wife of 3 years. He looked at her with the eyes of a man seeing something for the first time that has been there for a long time, the way you see a crack in a wall you've lived with long enough to stop registering. Go home, he said. Min-ha. Go home to Ha-Un. I'll call you when I'm discharged. She left. The room was a different quality of quiet after she did. He waited 2 days. Then he requested the meeting himself. His assistant called Mary's number and asked if she would bring Lily back to the hospital. Not for ceremony this time, no formal thank you, just a visit between two families. Casual. The girls could meet. Mary said she'd think about it. She thought about it for 4 hours, which for her was equivalent to most people's 2-day deliberation. She said yes. The second visit was different. No nurses coming and going. No formal arrangement of chairs. He was dressed, sitting by the window when they arrived, a chessboard on the table beside him that he clearly used for thinking rather than playing since all the pieces were on one side. Lily walked in ahead of Mary and looked at him the way she always looked at people she'd decided she liked, with direct, unsentimental approval. You look better, she told him. I feel better. Did you sleep? Eventually. You have to sleep, she informed him. Mommy says sleep is when your body fixes things. Your mommy, he said carefully, is correct. He looked up at Mary over Lily's head. She was watching him with that expression she'd had since the first visit, calm on the surface, working on something underneath, like a translation she hadn't finished yet. Sit down, he said. To both of them. They did. He reached into a bag beside his chair and produced a small box, a children's puzzle, wooden, shaped like animals. He slid it across to Lily. Lily received it with both hands and immediately began examining it with the serious focus of a structural engineer. I want to ask you something, he said to Mary. All right. Your daughter was born here. In Gyeongju. Pause. Yes. At Gyeongju General. Her eyes shifted slightly. Yes. He kept his voice even. Like the question was ordinary. Was the birth complicated? The word complicated landed in the room and settled. Mary looked at him for a moment before answering. Her expression did something careful. There were 2 of them, she said. At first. The puzzle piece Lily had been fitting and clicked into place in the silence. Minha sat very still. Twins, he said. One didn't survive, she said in the voice she used when she was reporting a fact rather than feeling it. That's what I was told. He looked at her. She looked back at him. And between them, in the light of a Gyeongju hospital window with a 3-year-old quietly puzzling animals together on the floor, a terrible and enormous thing began to take shape. Neither of them named it yet. But they were both already inside it. She didn't sleep that night either. Mary had come home from the second hospital visit, made Lily's dinner, run the bath, listened to Lily explain, at some length, that the wooden giraffe from the puzzle was named Gerald and had complicated feelings about the elephant, and she had done all of this with her hands steady and her voice at its normal register. Then she had sat at the kitchen table in the dark for 2 hours. She had said the words out loud once, alone, to the kitchen. There were 2 of them. At first. She had never said those words casually in her life. She had said them to Lee Chan and to nobody else because they were the kind of words that cost something each time they were used, and she had learned to ration them. And yet she had said them to Min Ha at a hospital window, on the second time they had spoken in 7 years. She had said them because he asked and because, this was the part she couldn't resolve, he'd asked in a way that suggested he already knew part of the answer. He had asked about complications. About the hospital. He had asked like a man who was measuring the distance between what he'd been told and what was actually true, and had come to her for the calculation. She pulled up what was publicly available about Ha-Un's birth. She had avoided doing this specifically for 48 hours, because she was a practical woman and practical women do not go looking for things that will make them impractical. She looked. Ha-Un. Born March 14th. At Gyeongju General Hospital. The same hospital. The same night. She closed the laptop slowly. She opened it again. She found the photograph she'd taken at the second hospital visit. Lily on the floor, puzzle pieces in her hands, head bent in concentration. She enlarged it. Then she found the news footage. Ha-un on Beatrice's lap, turned toward the camera during one of the family's public statements after the Wonder Kid story broke. She put the images side by side. She sat with them for a very long time. Then she did something that surprised her, which was that she did not panic. She got up. She made tea. She stood at the kitchen window while it brewed and watched the Gyeongju street below. Quiet at this hour, a convenience store light buzzing at the corner, a cat crossing the road with immense dignity. She thought about Lee Chan. She thought about the year after Minha, the year she'd spent in a grief she hadn't let herself call grief because it was too tangled up with humiliation, the particular shame of being the woman who had been left for a better arrangement. The year she had worked too hard and eaten too little and filled every hour with anything that wasn't the feeling. Lee Chan had appeared in that year. He had been Minha's childhood friend, had known them both at university, had always been present at the edges of their group, quiet, solid, consistently there in the way that certain people are, so reliable that you stop registering them consciously and simply come to depend on the fact of them. He had called her when he heard. He had said he was sorry. He had not offered anything beyond that, no solutions, no advice, no filling of the silence with reassurance. He had just said he was sorry and meant it. She had found that easier to be around than almost anything else at that time. They had married 2 years later. She had not questioned the timing. She had not questioned a lot of things in those years because questions were expensive and she had been running on a tight budget. Now she stood at the kitchen window and she thought, what did Lee Chan know and when did he know it? She put the question down, picked up her tea. She wasn't ready for that particular room yet. Minha was discharged 4 days later. He did not return immediately to Seoul. He booked 3 nights in Gyeongju, which his assistant accepted without visible surprise because she had learned years ago that when Minha's jaw had that particular set, logistical questions were not welcome. He called Mary the morning of his first full day out of the hospital. I'd like to walk, he said. If you have time. If Lily could come. She looked at the pharmaceutical document on her desk, due Friday. I have a few hours. The Market Street, he said. I'd like to see it. She understood what he meant. He wanted to see the place it happened. People often needed to do that. 11, she said. 11, he said. The Market Street in the morning was quieter than it got by afternoon. The vendors were setting up, unhurried, arranging things with the ease of people who have done this for years. The air smelled like cooking oil and autumn leaves and the stone of old buildings doing what they'd always done. Minha walked slowly, still recovering, and Mary matched his pace without making it obvious she was doing so. Lily walked between them for approximately 4 minutes before conducting a personal audit of available diversions and finding a man selling small ceramic figures far more interesting than adults. Mary bought her one to keep her occupied. She and Minha walked a few steps ahead, close enough to watch Lily and speak without being overheard. She goes where she wants, Minha observed. She always has. Ha-un is the same. He kept his eyes forward. It cost us 3 houseplants this year. She laughed. The kind that comes before you've decided to allow it. He looked at her sideways when she laughed. She felt it. Minha. She said his name the way she'd been carefully not saying it since the first visit. As itself, just his name without a subject attached. What do you know? He was quiet for 10 steps. What I know, he said, is that my daughter and your daughter were born on the same night in the same hospital and look at each other from across a park the way I'd imagine 2 people look at each other if they'd met somewhere before and couldn't remember where. Mary's steps didn't change. You've brought the girls together? Not yet. He paused. I'd like to. She looked at him properly then. He looked back. You're asking if I'll let Ha-un meet Lily, she said. I'm asking, he said, if you're as certain as I am that we need to understand what we're looking at. Because I think you are. I think you've been sitting with this for days and you're a more careful person than me so you haven't said it yet, but I think we're looking at the same thing. She held his gaze for a moment. Bring Ha-un, she said. Ha-un arrived 3 days later with a small suitcase and strong opinions about seating arrangements. She was, Mary saw immediately, a complete person. Not in the general way that children are, in the specific way that certain children arrive in the world already knowing their own texture. She had Ha-eun's, no. She had her father's quality of paying attention. The same stillness. The same way of deciding about things before announcing the decision. She stood at the park entrance with her hand in Min-ha's and she looked across the grass at Lily. Lily was already there, Gerald the giraffe under one arm, and she looked back at Ha-eun with the same focused attention. For 3 full seconds neither girl moved. Then Ha-eun let go of Min-ha's hand. She walked forward. Lily walked forward. They stopped 2 feet apart and examined each other with the detailed intensity of scientists who have found something important and aren't going to rush the examination. Ha-eun reached out and touched Lily's cheek. Lily let her. Then Lily touched Ha-eun's cheek. Ha-eun nodded as though confirming something. Then they both ran. Mary stood beside Min-ha watching them and she could not speak for a full minute and she did not try. She just watched the two of them move across the November grass with their identical stride and their identical laugh that started silent before it became sound. She felt his hand come to rest very lightly on her arm. He didn't say anything. She didn't either. There was nothing to say that the moment wasn't already saying more completely than language could. "I'll get the test done," he said finally. She nodded. Quietly. She nodded again. He removed his hand from her arm. Lily ran past and both of them reached out instinctively at the same moment to catch her coat before she ran too near the path, and their hands met briefly over Lily's head, both of them catching the same small shoulder at the same moment. They stepped back simultaneously. "Sorry," she said. "No," he said. He stopped. He looked at her with all of that 7 years of unsaid things pressing behind his eyes, and he did not say any of them because there was a test not yet done and a wife not yet confronted and a truth not yet confirmed that needed to be confirmed before any of the other things could exist without guilt. But he looked. And she felt the look the way you feel the sun on the back of your neck when you've been inside too long, specific and warm and making you realize suddenly what you'd been missing. "There's something else I need to tell you," he said. "About how this started. About who arranged it." He turned back to watch the girls. "About what Lee Chan knew." Mary went still beside him. "Not here," he said. "Not today." "When?" He watched Ha-eun take Lily's hand as they ran, the way you take someone's hand when you've always known it should be there. "Soon," he said. "I need to be sure first." She nodded. She looked at the 2 little girls running across the November grass. She started to say something and stopped. He waited. "She used to cry," Mary said finally. Very quietly. "Some nights in the first year. She'd reach across, in her sleep she'd reach across the crib to the other side." She paused. "I told myself babies did that." Min-ha said nothing. "I knew," she said. "Just that. Somewhere. I knew." The results came back in 72 hours. Min-ha's private physician delivered the report in person, in the front room of the Gyeongju residence he'd rented, with the careful demeanor of someone who understands that certain documents require a human hand and not an email. 1 sentence. The subjects share 100% of maternal genetic markers consistent with monozygotic twinning. Min-ha read it once. Then he set it on the table and went to the window and stood there for 11 minutes, which he knew because the clock on the wall made a sound every minute and he counted them. Then he picked up his phone. He had 2 calls to make. He made the harder one first. Beatrice answered on the second ring this time, which told him she had been waiting. "The test came back," he said. Nothing from her end. Just that thin, careful breathing he'd noticed in the hospital. "Beatrice." He kept his voice at its negotiating level, not cold, not warm, just precise. "I need you to understand what I know before you decide what to say next. I know the girls are twins. I know they were born at Gyeongju General on the same night. I know Mary was told one of her daughters didn't survive." He paused. "I know Ha-eun was not born to you." The silence this time was not strategic. It was the silence of a structure losing its support. "Min-ha, I'm not calling to argue. I'm not calling to negotiate. I'm calling because you are going to tell me who else was involved. Every person. Every arrangement. I need the full shape of it. You don't understand what Who arranged the hospital staff?" A long pause. "I need a lawyer," she said. "You need to start talking," he said. Because in approximately 1 hour I'm going to have this conversation with Mary Johnson, and what you tell me in the next 30 minutes determines the shape of what follows. He could hear her breathing. Then, I did it because I was terrified. Her voice had come apart. The architecture had dropped and underneath it was something raw and young sounding, something that belonged to the girl she'd been before she became the woman she'd trained herself into. He was never going to love me. 3 years we'd been married and he never, and I thought if I had a child, if he had something real with me, something he couldn't. Beatrice. I thought she would make us real. He closed his eyes. You took a child. She cried then. The undignified, total kind. He did not comfort her. But he did not hang up either. He waited, because he was not a cruel man, until it subsided enough for her to speak. There was a nurse, she said. Park Soon-hee. I don't know if she's still. I'll find her. He ended the call. He stood at the window for another moment. Then he called Mary. She arrived in 20 minutes. He had tea made because he'd needed something to do with his hands. He set a cup in front of her and sat across the kitchen table and slid the DNA report across the surface between them. She looked at it. She read it. She already knew. He could see that she already knew. But the reading of it, the formal, documented, undeniable reality of it, did something to her face that all her preparation hadn't fully prevented. She set the report down. She looked at him. Lily was her name, Mary said. Just that. Not a question. He didn't answer because there was nothing to add. In the hospital when they told me, she stopped. Reorganized. Lee Chan was there. He held my hand. He told me that it happened and that we had Lily and that Lily was healthy and that I needed to focus on that. Minha watched her. He was very gentle, she said. He was always very gentle. She said it without bitterness. Which was, he thought, the most complicated thing about Mary. She was precise in how she allocated blame. She didn't let grief manufacture extra. Mary, he said. She looked at him. Before I tell you what I know about Lee Chan, I need you to understand that I didn't know any of this. Not the separation, not how it happened or why. I believed what I was told because I had no reason not to. I've asked myself since what I missed, whether I should have looked harder. He held her gaze. I should have looked harder. She was quiet. You were 28, she said. That's not an excuse. No, she said. But it's a fact. Beatrice is very good at what she does. He nodded slowly. She told me you'd left with someone else. Something flickered in Mary's expression. She told me you'd chosen your family's arrangement. That you'd moved on. 7 years sitting between them on a kitchen table in Gyeongju. He put his hands flat on the table the way he always did when he needed grounding. I called your number for 3 weeks. I didn't know that. I blocked your line. He looked at her. She looked back. They stayed like that for a moment. 2 people doing the specific arithmetic of what was taken from them. Lee Chan, he said finally. He had to say it. It had been pressing against the inside of his chest since he confirmed it. He found out. He had a meeting with Beatrice before you left Seoul. Beatrice admitted it. To make you disappear from me forever. Mary was very still. No. Lee Chan loved me, he would never. And, Minha said. She closed her eyes briefly. He didn't tell you, Minha said. He found out that I hadn't left you. That you hadn't left me. He found out that we had been deliberately separated. And he stopped. Found the most honest way through it. He chose to keep it because the alternative was losing you. The kitchen was quiet enough to hear the clock on the wall. The radiator knocked. Mary opened her eyes. She looked at her hands on the table. She looked at them the way you look at your own hands when you are recalibrating your understanding of the things they have touched. He loved me, this can't be right. He was my best friend, she said, the same way she'd said it in his imaginings of this conversation. Yes, Minha said. I believe he did. And he chose himself. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. She was quiet for a very long time. Long enough that the clock counted 4 minutes and the tea went cold. He's gone, she said finally. And the way she said it, not as grief but as placement, as setting a thing in its proper location, told him everything about the interior life she had built in these 3 years. He made his choice. He's gone. And I can't hold a dead man accountable in a way that does anything useful. She looked up. But I can be angry, she said. You can, he said. I am. I'm sorry. She breathed. He watched her. He wanted to reach across the table. He did not reach across the table. Beatrice is going to face this? She asked. The prosecutor's office will have everything by Monday. The nurse who was involved, Park Soon-hee, she's already in contact with them. He'd had his team confirm it that morning. Beatrice will have to answer for it. Mary nodded. Haun, she said. Her voice on the name was careful. Tender even. She doesn't know. No. She calls you Daddy. Since she was 8 months old. Mary looked at him. She's not losing you. Whatever happens, she is not losing you. The directness of it, the speed with which she went there to the child's protection before any conversation about her own rights, did something to him that he hadn't been prepared for. He had known at 28 that she was like this. But knowing something at 28 and encountering it at 35 after years of its absence are entirely different experiences. She's not losing me, he said. And she's going to know her sister. Mary nodded. Something settled between them. Not resolved, there was too much still in motion for resolution, but settled. The way things settle when two people have decided to face the same direction. He looked at her across the table. She looked at him. I owe you 7 years, he said quietly. You don't owe me anything, she said. Neither of us was the architect of this. No, he said. But I should have found you. The sentence landed. She looked at her cup. You found me now, she said. And she didn't look up. But the corner of her mouth moved. Just slightly. Just enough. He kept it. That small, almost there thing. He kept it the way he'd been keeping small things about her since the hospital room. The ink stain, the unauthorized laugh, the way she had held Lily's hand on the way out like she was steadying herself as much as the child. He kept all of it. He had not been able to stop. The trial lasted 14 weeks. Mary had expected it to feel like a conclusion. Instead it felt like a long hallway she had to walk through to get somewhere else. Necessary, not comfortable, lit by a particular harsh fluorescence that made everything look exactly what it was. She gave her statement on a Thursday morning in October, standing at a podium in a courtroom that had very good acoustics and an overwhelming number of cameras in the corridor outside. She spoke for 11 minutes. She did not describe her grief in dramatic terms. She did not reach for language that would play well in the evening news recap. She simply described what had happened and what she had lost and what it had cost her. One fact following another, in order, the way she translated documents, each word carrying its exact weight and no more. The courtroom was very quiet while she spoke. Beatrice sat at the defense table in a charcoal blazer and did not look at her. Mary did not look at Beatrice either. She kept her eyes on the middle distance, the way you do when you're saying something you've prepared so carefully it lives in your body rather than your mind. When she was finished, she walked back to her seat without looking at anyone. Min-ha was in the gallery. They had agreed, carefully and practically, that they would not sit together in court. It was complicated enough. There were enough cameras. Haun's situation needed protection from the particular appetite of public narrative, and two parents who had once been in love sitting side by side during the trial of the woman who had taken their daughter would have generated a story that consumed the one underneath it. So he sat on the left side of the gallery and she sat on the right, and they did not look at each other, and the restraint of it cost both of them something they did not discuss. The verdict came on a Wednesday. Guilty on all counts. Beatrice received her sentence in the same composed silence she received most things. Only her hands, folded on the table, tightened slightly at the word guilty, and then were still again. Min-ha had already signed the divorce papers before the verdict. He'd gone to see Beatrice one final time at the remand facility. No lawyers. Just the two of them and a table between them. He didn't bring anger. He didn't have anger left, which surprised him. He had expected to, had prepared himself to manage it, but when he sat across from her he found only the exhaustion of someone who has carried a structure that was never sound and has finally put it down. He slid the papers across. She looked at them. I could have made you happy, she said. Her voice was different now, not performed, just tired. Given time. And you actually believed that? He said. Didn't you? At all? In 7 years. He looked at the table. There were good days. Real ones. He didn't want to be dishonest about this. You are not a simple person, Beatrice. What you did is not who you entirely are. Our relationship was not normal. We were either at the high top, fighting and dragging our families into it, or we're going on expensive dates, vacation, grand gestures and parties like we were trying to convince ourselves we were in love. We were never in the middle, the quiet normalcy that comes with real couples in love. I can forgive and push myself through a loveless marriage. She looked at him. Her eyes were dry. She had stopped crying somewhere in the middle weeks of the trial, and what had replaced it was something more settled and harder to look at. But, she said. But I cannot forgive taking a mother's child, he said. I've tried the sentence out 100 times looking for a version I can get past. There isn't one. He stood. Haun will know you, he said, when she's old enough to choose. I won't take that from her. He picked up his copy of the papers. But I can't be in the same life with this. He walked out. He did not look back. Mary went to the prison 3 weeks after the sentencing. Alone. On a Tuesday, which is somehow the least dramatic day of the week and felt right for this. She sat across the glass from the woman who had been her friend, who had eaten ramen in her kitchen and helped her choose earrings and clapped the loudest at her thesis presentation, and then used every piece of knowledge gleaned from all of that closeness to do the most surgical damage possible. Beatrice looked smaller in the prison visiting room. Not physically, but the architecture that she'd always worn, the composed readiness, had been removed along with everything else. Why? Mary asked. Just the word. No preamble. Beatrice's eyes filled. She didn't look away. Because you had everything I wanted. Without trying. Without knowing. He saw you from across a room and I watched it happen and I knew from that moment that I was never going to be enough. Mary looked at her. I lost a daughter, she said. I held a funeral in my chest for a child who was breathing. For 3 years I lay in the dark next to the memory of something that never happened. Her voice didn't break. It moved the way a held thing moves just before it's released. When you looked at my daughter every morning and called her yours, did you let yourself think about that? Beatrice covered her face. Once, she said through her hands. Every day. Once. Mary sat with that. She could forgive one day. The word forgive felt too clean for what she actually meant. She meant something more like, I will not let this be the thing I carry. I will not give it that much of my life. What you did is yours to carry. Not mine. She didn't say this. It wasn't for Beatrice. I wanted you to hear this from me directly. She stood. Haun is loved. Both her fathers love her and her sister loves her and she is fine. She is more than fine. She picked up her bag. That's not because of what you did. That's despite it. She walked out. The drive home was quiet. She didn't cry until she was parked outside her apartment building in Gyeongju, and then she cried for about 4 minutes, not for Beatrice, not for what was lost, but for the younger version of herself that had deserved better and hadn't known to ask for it. Then she went upstairs. She made soup. She was practical. She had always been practical. The twins turned 4 in the spring. Yellow balloons, because Lily had declared yellow the color of being happy and Haun had adopted this immediately as established fact. They had decided most things together now with the specific confidence of people who have found their co-conspirator. Haun still called Minha daddy. He was her father. That wasn't complicated, or rather, it was complicated in the way all real things are, but the love wasn't. The love was simple and certain and had been since she was 8 months old and had said the word for the first time pointing at him with the authority of a child naming something she owns. He and Mary had talked about it, of course. They talked about most things now. The girls, the upcoming school year, the heritage preservation project his company was developing in Gyeongju, the pharmaceutical translation she was working on, the Gerald the giraffe situation, which had become genuinely complex involving several disputed territories and a tribunal. They talked in the particular way of 2 people who have discovered that the other person is good company and cannot quite bring themselves to be brief about it. It had happened slowly. Not as a decision. Not as a moment. But as the slow, persistent return of something that had been interrupted rather than ended, the way certain pieces of music, when resumed, sound less like starting over and more like remembering. He had not rushed it. She would not have permitted rushing. Not because she wasn't willing, but because she had learned, at some cost, to distrust speed in things that mattered. He had not said anything direct until a Tuesday evening in February, when they were standing outside the girls' school after pickup, both of them waiting for Lily and Ha-eun to say their elaborate goodbyes to approximately everyone they had ever met, and the sun was doing that particular February thing of being warmer than you expected, and she had turned her face up to it briefly with her eyes closed. He had watched her. And it was the same feeling it had always been, specific and particular and entirely her, not transferable and not reducible to explanation. "Mary," he'd said. Eyes still closed. Face still up. "I need to say something before I lose my nerve." She opened her eyes. She looked at him. "7 years ago someone made a decision for us," he said. "I spent a long time being angry about that. And then I spent a long time deciding it didn't change anything." He looked at her directly. "It changed everything. But the thing underneath the everything, the thing I had before any of this, that didn't change." She was quiet. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I'm not. I know this is a lot. I know there is still so much that is still." Minha. Behind them, the school doors burst open and Lily and Ha-eun emerged in a quantity of noise that seemed geometrically larger than two children should produce, both of them talking simultaneously about something that had happened at lunch that was apparently both a great injustice and deeply funny. They ran to their parents. Ha-eun reached for Minha's hand automatically, the way you reach for something that belongs to you. Lily reached for Mary's. And they all stood there in the February sun for a moment, the four of them, in the particular warmth of something that has survived everything thrown at it and is still, against the odds, standing. The last Saturday of November was cold and bright. Minha stopped at the gift shop. He came out with 2 teddy bears, one in each arm. He held them down to Lily and Ha-eun in the way you offer things to people whose opinions matter to you. Ha-eun took hers and immediately held it up to study its face. "He needs a name," she said. "He does," Minha agreed. Ha-eun thought about it with her dual ear tuck, both sides simultaneously, which meant the matter was serious. Lily held her own bear. Gerald was at home, presumably adjudicating something. This bear was new and required introduction. She pressed her nose against its nose in the formal manner she reserved for first meetings. "She's a girl," Lily announced. "My apologies," Minha said to the bear. Mary, standing beside him, laughed. He looked at her. She looked back. He didn't reach for her hand yet. They were still, or she was still, in the careful, unhurried place where neither of them moved faster than the other was ready for. But he stood close, like someone who has decided where they belong and is in no hurry because arriving is enough. They walked into the market. The same market. The same stone and persimmon smell, the same vendors calling prices over each other's heads, the same lanterns in the early afternoon light. Lily ran ahead. Ha-eun ran after her. And Minha and Mary walked behind them through the Gyeongju market, not holding hands, just close. And around them the city did its ancient, indifferent business, unconcerned with the specific improbability of two people who had been separated by a lie finding their way back through the city where a 3-year-old had stopped for a stranger. Same city. Same street. Different story. So here is what I want to know. When Mary sat across from Beatrice in that prison visiting room, would you have said what she said? Or would you have said something else entirely? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to know because I think this is the moment that divides people. If this story moved you, and I suspect it did, give it a like. Right now. It means more than you think and it takes half a second and it tells me to keep bringing you stories like this one. Finally, the audiobook for my last updated video, the wait is almost over. Korean billionaire visits his best friend's sister and sees a 7-year-old with his own gray eyes, is coming live on Gumroad. Link would be dropped on my community page on Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Africa time, and if you haven't subscribed, now is the time so you don't miss out. This story includes a deeply narrated version of that story, and it is a 2-in-1 audiobook. Thank you for staying till the end. I'll see you on my next story. I love you.